Alcoholic. I was just sitting back there thinking, I think the Lord just found that the world was a little gloomy one day and made musicians. And then we get stuff like that. And all I could sit there and say was thank you for sending us the very best. We are truly blessed to have you guys here with us every Sunday, no matter what form of the crackpots we get. It's always amazing. So thank you very, very much. I am blessed to be here with all of you this evening in this beautiful old church. I have the pleasure of wrapping up Step 8 here with you this evening, and next Sunday is going to be birthday night, so you know what that means. We'll have a guest speaker up here in the spotlight, and we'll finish the evening off with some cake and some fellowship. But before that, we'll work a little bit on Step 8 tonight, and I'll wrap up with some long-term recovery stuff. Step 8 and Step 9 are the last of the 12 steps that deal with our past. So it's vital here at this point of your recovery to ensure that these steps are done correctly. When you fully embrace the guiding principles of Alcoholics Anonymous, you'll be able to cleanse the debris of your past and gain newfound knowledge about yourself. This cleansing ritual of AA's Step 8 is a very vital part of your journey wherein you strengthen your ability to develop positive relations with everyone who crosses your path in life. So let's just uncover the purpose behind Step 8 of AA. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. As you embark on Step 8 of AA, you'll need to prepare for the pain associated with your fresh or old emotional wounds. This may feel like a purposeless conquest if you're convinced that the damage can't be rectified. But you need to reach deep down within yourself and apologize with genuine remorse. If you're willing to put in the effort, you'll start to see the benefits of completing Step 8 of AA. The pain and the guilt consuming you will start to melt away as you mend relationships and seek forgiveness for past actions. The time it takes to complete Step 8 depends on you. Some members of AA procrastinate completing this step due to the fear. And you might be afraid to take responsibility for the harms caused to other people. You might also be afraid to forgive the people of your past who have caused you pain too. But you'll want to get started on this step earlier because it paves the way for you to let go of resentment, blame, and self-pity. You'll remember that all humans make mistakes, and then you may even just be able to forgive yourself. So Step 8 is the first step taken towards making those amends. We are learning to live with great peace. We are learning to create great partnerships. We are learning to be part of a brotherhood or a sisterhood. But before we can mend these relationships, we need to identify the people that we have caused harm to. We do this by listing who we believe we have harmed, and when we do this, we are holding ourselves accountable by admitting that we are human and we too have made mistakes. By doing this, we develop compassion for ourselves, and by forgiving those who have harmed us, we are set free. So extending a decent dose of authentic love requires humility and knowing that these actions will not only help in your recovery, but they will also benefit the greater good. This will require a fair amount of trust. So some tips for starting or working Step 8 of AA. In this step, you're going to be making that list of the people you've harmed, and then you must become willing to make amends to each person. So understanding your interpersonal relations will go a long way in seeing how you can interact with the world. You'll be able to take account of the pain you've caused to others, as well as any lingering resentments that you may have towards others. So here's some helpful tips for starting and working this step. Number 1 is look back on your life and personal relations to see where you've caused harm. Number 2 is don't forget to include yourself on this list because you too will be seeking forgiveness. Number 3 is bring out your moral inventory from Step 4 to help compile everything together. 4 is go further than just writing down the names. We need to include specifics of the harms and the other reactions. Then I want you to reflect on each of these experiences and acknowledge how you currently feel about them. Think about your reasoning for making an amends and what you hope to accomplish. Next, you can then start to write that amends and to make that amends to each person on your list. But before you do that, you always discuss your list and your proposed amends with your sponsor, therapist, or spiritual advisor. So how do we make amends to those that we have harmed then? Well, when you make amends, you want to make sure that it first fits the context of the harm for the damage. For instance, in some cases, a simple apology will do for your bad behavior. In other situations, you may need to repay an individual or offer some sort of recompense on your part. But if someone you have harmed is no longer alive, well then what do? Well, you vow to live differently so that you don't hurt people in the same way. You have to keep in mind, though, is that you actually have to do what you say or what you promise. And that's how we fully accept responsibility and move forward. There is some myths about AA. The biggest one is that our alcohol use disorder or addiction use disorder has only harmed ourselves. And by doing this, we often try to minimize the negative impacts that we've had on other people. If the damage wasn't extreme, we don't feel that we need to take responsibility. Step 8 of AA is about being vulnerable and rigorously honest. You might discover damage you've caused to others that is painful to accept, but now's your chance to uncover how your alcohol use disorder affected all the others close to you. You know, the other myth I hear is, well, making amends is not going to help me. Well, if you go into this step with a negative attitude, chances are you're right. It is important to remember that you get what you put in. If you're not vulnerable and honest with yourself and others, you'll have a harder time embracing your sobriety to the full degree. You never know the potential impact of hearing how you made someone else feel until you start apologizing for your actions. These conversations can help to motivate you to continue to live in this life that we call sobriety. So where do you go from here? Well, similar to most steps in AA, Step 8 gives you the tools and the know-how to continue your journey towards lasting recovery. So since this step focuses on interpersonal relationships, the S's are just popping through this thing like crazy. It's driving me nuts. But you'll create a foundation for all your future relations with yourself and with others. So once you're truly able to let go of the damage and pain that you've caused others, you can begin that new life of sobriety. And once you've successfully completed Step 8, you'll be able to move on to the next step, Step 9. And then you're on your way to completing all Step 12 of these programs. So what do we do when we complete the steps? Well, that's what I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking with you about here this evening. We don't often speak on long-term recovery. Our crowd most evenings, for the majority, is in early recovery. So that's where we focus our energy, on bringing you the steps and the spirituality piece that so many struggle with in the early stages. I remember early recovery. It was a mix of extreme highs and extreme lows. I struggled, but I made it through. It was difficult at times, but it was not until I reached long-term recovery that I realized that getting sober was the easy part. It was long-term where the struggle lied. So here's why I think it is that way. Finding a new way of life in the early stages of recovery is exciting, and there's a ton of work to be done. This is where we find that alcohol and drugs have been our long-term solution to a list of many personal problems. Our problem is alcoholism. It's not so much the first part as it is the last part. Our problem is those isms, I, self, and me. Selfishness and self-centeredness, that is the root of our problem. So in long-term recovery, the isms, if you are not careful, come back long before the alcohol ever does. So after we've completed these steps, just how long can we stay sober if this is where our journey of recovery work ends? How long is it before we decide that life just isn't treating us well? Well, when we stop doing the work, that's where that struggle begins. I know for myself, when my selfishness starts to take over, when all I can see is what I personally want, when I become hyper-focused on something that only feeds my ego, my life as I know it begins to change. I have to fight for every inch to reach that goal, and most times it becomes unattainable. All of a sudden, I'm not getting what I need because all I can focus on is what I want. So the secret to enjoyable long-term recovery really boils down to finding as many ways as possible to get out of yourself. There are many amazing examples of long-term recovery that call Central United home. And there are many ways to get out of self that are not directly related to AA or to other anonymous programs. Take my dear friend Bruce. He's a great example of long-term recovery. Just about every time I see Bruce, he introduces me to a new friend of his that is also new to recovery. Bruce always tells me about the amazing places he has taken his bike, but his stories are always about who he was with or the people that he met along the way. They never ever seem to be about himself. But they are always about getting away from his isms. And I know that he is enjoying long-term recovery. Jay, who's usually in the back row, who I think snuck away to have a nap tonight, he was getting pretty tired at the end of the week, is also another great example. That All Addictions meeting downstairs has been a huge success, but that's because the meeting was never about Jay pumping up his own ego. The meeting for Jay was about giving anyone and everyone a safe place to share their struggles and successes of their journey. Jay did not have a selfish goal in mind, but that meeting keeps him accountable to his recovery and gives him a great way to get out of self. You know, I frequently give Jay a hard time, but he truly is inspirational, and I look up to him, and it's his own fault for not being here tonight to hear it. Tina's another example who spends her time giving back instead of with the isms. She now has a small army of volunteers who are doing amazing work around here as we get geared up for the next big chapter of this church. Tina and her volunteers are focused on helping others in any way they can. It does amazing things for their own journey. And the greatest example of selfless acts and the gifts of long-term recovery is Peter. Just a show of hands here tonight, who has all had Peter as an influential part of their recovery? That's a lot of hands, Peter. Peter's phone never stops ringing, and the amazing thing is he never stops answering it. If he would have let it ring that day that I finally gave in and called, well, I might not be standing in front of you here today. And I'm sure many of you here tonight could say the same thing. Peter keeps his isms in the rear view, and he keeps his hand stretched out for the next person who is struggling in the depths of their own personal hell. The moral of all these stories is that long-term recovery is achieved by getting out of your own way. We remain grateful for our sobriety because we are able to give the gift of sobriety to countless others. Be a part of other people's miracles. Be a part of something bigger. Give back to this world in any way that you can. Because let me tell you, friends, that's what really matters. When your time down here is through and the good Lord calls you home, the gold in your bank account won't matter to God, but every act of kindness, every selfless act, that, my friends, is what makes your worth your weight in gold. This is what punches your ticket to heaven. And it just also happens to be the best remedy for keeping you sober and enjoying long-term recovery. So be selfless this week, friends. Look out for others. Remember, smiles are free. So take the time to offer a smile. You just might find it has the power to change the world. Please join me in our closing prayers. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. As always, I would like to thank you.